Good morning, everyone. This is the Senate Education Committee. It's 9:15 and time to start. So let's stand up and Senator
Yes, I
Prentice.
never sat down.
Thank you,
Stand up and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. So our first bill this morning is House Bill 394. And Representative Spilsbury is not here, so Representative Cordelli is going to introduce it. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Senators. Pleasure to be with you again. For the record, Glenn Cordelli, representing Tufton Borough, Wolfboro, and Ossipee in the beautiful Lakes region. And this is a fairly simple bill, SB 394, excuse me, HB 394, forget where I am, is a relatively simple bill. It passed the House on the consent calendar. It basically just does two things. In statute right now, there is the establishment of a budget committee for cooperative school districts, if they so choose. It allows the chair of the school board to appoint a committee member to the budget committee. And what this bill does is change the status of that member to basically a non-voting member of the budget committee under the premise that that member is already have a vote on the budget as a school board committee member. So that's the first thing it does. And then the second thing it does, when there is an appropriation or warrant article outside of the budget, the budget committee is chartered to review and make recommendations on that appropriation before there is public discussion of the appropriation or the warrant article. And it requires the budget committee's vote, their recommendation, to be printed on the warrant article so that the public has an idea as to the recommendation of the budget committee. And that's basically all this this bill does. Two simple changes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Questions by the committee members? None? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have a list of people like to testify? Representative Margaret Dry. Well, you didn't want to speak. You just want to be here and support the bill. Okay. Anybody else in the audience would like to speak on this bill? Seeing none, that closes the hearing on House Bill 394. And you all have 10 minutes before the next bill. So enjoy. 4:31. Okay.
Senator, do you want to accept this now?
No, no. It might be 2-2. 9:30, we'll open up the hearing on House Bill 431. Representative Cordelli, are you introducing it for Representative Damon?
Be glad to introduce House Bill 431. Again, for the record, Glenn Cordelli representing Tufton Borough, Wolfboro, and Ossipee in the beautiful Lakes region. And this amended bill passed out of the House establishes a commission to look at special education. We've heard a lot of talk in the past few months about special education, the costs, and various issues related to special education. So we felt there was the need for this commission to really look at three main issues. First of all is the costs that we have discussed in relation to the budget, or you will be discussing in relation to the budget. Why are there more students being identified as special needs than in the past? The number of students has remained fairly constant at about 32,000, but with the declining enrollment, the percentage of those being categorized has increased. And also look at possibly some issues related to processes related to special education. And this has come up in other areas, and we felt we could take a look at that as part of this commission also. In terms of costs, there are specific things that are identified in the bill. For instance, the Medicaid to Schools program, which has a significant amount of money involved. And we need to look a little bit closely at that. The Education Funding Committee of the House has a subcommittee which is doing some work in that right now. But there are schools that bill themselves, schools that outsource billing for Medicaid. I've heard of one school district that uses a billing company in Texas to bill for Medicaid. And there are some schools that don't bill at all and submit claims to the Department of Education for payment. So we need to look at that. We need to look at, for instance, how students and the number of students being categorized as special needs. I got a hold of a disability categories chart from the U.S. Department of Education for 2023 that listed the categories that they maintain and the percentage of students on the average nationally in each of these categories, and took a look at our New Hampshire data from 2024 for those categories. And just the top couple, specific learning disabilities, nationally it's 35%. We're a little bit lower than that. Other health impairment, including ADHD, we're higher than the national average. Autism, we're a little bit higher than the national average. And speech or language impairment, we're significantly higher than the national average. So we take a look at that as part of this commission as well. But I think that's really the main intent of this commission, is to look at those three areas and to issue an interim report in November. It's not going to be possible to complete work, but we thought that an interim report could identify some areas for possible legislation for the 26 legislative year. And then a final report would be issued a year from this July. And then when the work is completed in July of 2026, this legislation would be repealed, is the last part of the legislation. So with that, that's a picture of what this amended bill is intended to do and what the commission is intended to do.
Any
And I thank you.
questions by the committee members? Questions? Senator Altshuler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question.
Sure.
So this is a completely different bill than what was filed. And I'm curious, like how on line 6, page 2, the question being asked of the commission is who uses service reimbursement funds? What does that mean? Are you looking for a profile? Are you looking for names?
No, really. For instance, one thing we've found since this was filed, there are some services that would be billed possibly by the school district. For instance, if they had a speech therapist on staff, they would be doing the billing. In some cases, they are outside servicing the service to be provided to a child with an IEP to a third party. And that third party would bill and receive payment from Medicaid. But how much reimbursement is going to school districts, how much reimbursement is going to third parties who are providing these services, those are things that we can look at as part of this. And that was the intent of that line.
May I follow up?
Follow up.
And the intention of line 10, the use of insurance by local districts to contract for legal services? Legal services for what? Like this is undefined.
Yes, right. This would be for special education, IEPs, due process hearings, et cetera, where very often the school district will have legal services participating in those meetings.
May I follow up?
Follow up.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the answer to your question. Are you saying that the local district brings in their legal team to represent the school during special ed and IEP meetings?
Yes.
To what end?
Uh,
I'm
to-
unfamiliar with this and spent many years as special ed parent, so I don't know what you're talking about.
There are IEP meetings and due process hearings where throughout the due process types of hearings where attorneys are brought in by the school district to participate and represent them. Parents usually do not have that ability to have legal services. And we thought it would be interesting to
Okay.
see how much that is actually costing school districts to have those services in those IEP and other due process meetings.
May I follow up?
Another follow up. Sure.
So in that category L on line 2, what you're saying is not necessarily what's here on the page. You're asking the commission to find a number of how much money was spent or how many times legal services were brought in. What is the measure that you're looking for in the word use?
Is insurance paid by the school district being used to contract for legal services for these meetings? And the extent of that.
Sure. Madam Chair, I want to,
Senator Prentice.
thank you so much. Representative Cordelli, is what I'm hearing you say that Medicaid money that's paying for services through Medicaid to schools for services that have been defined in an IEP that are billable through Medicaid to schools, that some of that money might be going to legal services?
No, I don't
Okay,
think
that's
that
what
was
I think I heard you say.
this L had nothing to do with K in terms of the Medicaid to schools program, in my mind anyway.
Okay,
Now, I'm sorry if I
It
misstated
may be
that.
my cup of coffee not being fully digested yet and a late flight in or an early morning flight in, but yeah. Okay, that's what I thought I heard you say, Representative Cordero.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Nope, thank you for the clarification.
any other questions? Another one from Senator Altshuler.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my questions. On page 1 of the amended bill, line 21. The commission shall study the following aspects and costs of special education. Why students may be labeled other health impaired. So again, are you looking for an accounting? How are you going to how are people going to access this data without breaching the confidentiality of the families that have only signed consent for their school districts and through the IDEA? Are you asking the department to aggregate data for the service this commission?
What types of disabilities would be categorized under that disability categories? Some further definition of what, for instance, on the categories mandated by the federal government, some further detail on what types of disabilities would be categorized under multiple disabilities or developmental delays, etc.
Representative Cordelli?
Yes.
Representative Damon just walked in, so maybe she would like to answer some of the questions and relieve you of it.
Well, I'm yeah, that anyone's fine to testify if they would so choose.
Okay. Did you have another question?
I do, thank you. So in line D of part 3, in part 3, section D, line 23, whether there are interventions that can be implemented prior to referrals for special education for some IDEA categories. So there's a whole lot going on in that sentence. Because what I think you might be referring to, but it's not enumerated anywhere in the bill, is the use of MTSS programs in elementary schools, particularly because that's where we're, first beginning to identify children for special ed and under IDEA. So is there a reason MTSS was not included in this study? And what interventions are you specifically looking for if you're not going to mention MTSS?
I didn't think it was necessary to mention MTSS specifically, but interventions, for instance, I know I've done a lot of work on in literacy and the interventions there and interventions in math and various subject areas where we now are looking at interventions. What level of intervention is going on there before a child is identified for referral to special education? That's something we've talked about quite a bit with literacy, I know, that in some of my past legislation.
Did you have another question?
No, one from Representative Damon.
All set? Thank you, Representative Cordelli.
Thank you.
Representative Damon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, committee. State Representative Hope Damon, Sullivan District 8. The reason I was not here to present this bill besides competing priorities is that this is no longer my bill. So the original version of 431 was a bill to create a commission to look at the redrafting process and have more comprehensive participation in the development and the revision of the 306 rules, the minimum standards for public education. That language was completely replaced by Representative Cordelli's amendment, which is what he's been speaking to and what you have in front of you as the now language of the bill. So the sponsors that are listed here were sponsors for the bill in regards to the minimum standards of public education. None of us participated in the development of the language that you have before you. I think there are, as the committee has clearly been exploring, many concerns and issues with this proposed commission to study the costs of special education, and I am not a supporter of that language. I would additionally add, I sit on the House Committee on Education Funding. We have a subcommittee that is currently meeting regularly on special education funding that is working diligently to explore right now. We're working on what used to be called catastrophic aid, the education funding for the children who have the most expensive, most complex needs. So part of what is in the language of Representative Cordelli's amendment is in fact already being addressed by other legislation and other work. So it's not at all clear to me that we need to reinvent the wheel. I'm happy to answer questions to the degree that I can, but as noted, this bill is not mine. And quite frankly, I hope someday we can fix this process, because this happens to folks on both sides of the aisle, that you draft a bill and then it's completely amended and it's not yours and your name's still on it. It doesn't seem productive for any of us. Thank you.
I have a question. I have an email from somebody who sent this in, who's very concerned that the amended bill allows the study commission to access to data that violates families' rights and privacy. How do you respond to that?
I know that in the House Education hearing on this language, that was brought up and was a concern of several people. And I think it is absolutely essential, both from a legal point of view and also an ethical point of view, that we respect families' privacy and that we are very deliberate and careful in any statute language that might compromise that.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time and your work.
Anybody else in the audience would like to speak on House Bill 431? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 431. Next, we're opening the hearing on House Bill 699. I should tell you right off the bat that the sponsor of the bill is not here, and she would like to introduce the bill and answer questions at that point. If somebody is here who would like to testify on the bill, knowing that she is not going to be here to introduce it, I will take the testimony. Otherwise, I will recess the bill until next week. So is there somebody here who would like to testify? The ones who have signed up? Representative Dry.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Senators. As for the record, I'm Representative Margaret Dry from Sullivan District 7, and I am not the author of the bill, but I am one of the co-sponsors. And I signed on to this bill because it is a partial response to an audit from the legislative budget, from the LBA on special ed about the need for definitions as they're found in federal statute. This bill expands and clarifies a lot of definitions. Many of the definitions that were in the statute were only only reflected part of a federal statute, and it's much better if we reference the federal statute instead of trying to take and carve out a small part, leaving some of the good parts undefined in our statute. Also, some terms were not accurate, and so it brought the language up to date. In the bill, there's a few things, examples of that, rephrasing acquired brain injury, which is the term which is approved now, and explaining the approved educational environment, kind of defining this so that some of the less than satisfactory environments aren't able to be accepted, and the term is defined better. And finally, a lot of the definitions in some of these amendments are referenced with the specific federal statute, the IDEA statute, where you can find the full definition. The one thing that generated the most controversy at our hearing was the fact that when we strike out an old piece of legislation, you put lines through it and it looks like it's gone forever rather than changed. And a lot of people thought that we were going to do away with related services. That was never the intent. And it was just to make sure that the definition became a better definition. Unfortunately, that was misunderstood. The fact that we do not have a large crowd of people here today means that the explanation was satisfactory. This bill passed 200 to 186 in the House. There was some talk of waiting and doing a larger session on definitions with stakeholders, but I think this is a partial step. It's not a full step, but I think it's an important step because some of these things are very easy to do right now, is to take the statute that we have and reference the federal statute. It'll be more important for us, it'll be clearer for us, and it will hold us until we can get to that larger kind of discussion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Questions? Senator Altshuler?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my questions. So there's just we received an extraordinary amount of opposition email to this bill, and I wonder if you wouldn't mind explaining, like, first of all, like, why there was a need to amend it from your first iteration.
The amendment, and perhaps Representative Cordelli could answer this a little bit better because he crafted the amendment. The amendment was specifically to put the federal reference into the definition so that you're defining this as defined in and list the IDEA statute.
So may I follow up?
Follow up?
So with such tumult at the federal level within the Department of Education, is it not wise to not fool around with definitions until there's some stability coming from the federal government?
Thank you for the question. No, I disagree with that. I think this is the time to do it. That's statute. That's in statute right now. That hasn't been changed. It's a good idea for us to reference that while we have that opportunity.
Follow up?
Sure. So one of the things referenced in this bill is an approved program. You state that it was responsible for all aspects of the provision of special education and related services. What does that mean, all aspects? Like, that seems rather undefined. So what do you mean by that?
Again, thank you for the question. I'm just looking at what was struck out in order to be substituted. I'm just going to say probably that's a better question for Representative Katab when she comes back.
Are you all set?
I think that
Okay.
it's clear we need to hear from the
Okay.
sponsor.
See no other questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Karen Rosenberg?
Good morning, Chairman Ward. I'm actually fine with waiting until Representative Kutab is here. If you are inclined to take a recess, I think it would be really helpful to hear from her.
Okay.
So thank you so much.
I have Representative Cordelli supports, Vanessa Blaze opposes, and Representative Damon opposes. There are no other speakers unless there's somebody in the audience. Representative Cordelli?
Thank you. I wasn't going to speak, but maybe I could follow up on
Put you
some
down
of.
for a yes.
Yes, I support it. Yes. Glenn Cordelli, representing Tufton Borough, Wilkesboro, and Ossipee. There was, as indicated, a lot of misunderstanding in relation to the original bill. A lot of people did come out and testify with concerns. Related services, as mentioned by Representative Dry, was one of the key areas. And basically, in the original bill, that provision was struck. Basically, as she explained, because it was just a partial definition of related services, which was quite lengthy in the federal statutes. The original bill we did not want to confuse people. So in the amended bill, we put in the reference to the federal statute for related services. We also added a number of other areas that were identified as concerns during the hearing. We worked with the Director of Special Education, Ms. Fredette from the Department of Education, who talked with a number of people who were at that hearing to see what their concerns were, and the amendment was a result of that process.
Thank you. Additional questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the audience who'd like to speak to this bill? Seeing none, that closes the hearing on House Bill 699. I'm sorry. We are recessing the bill till next time. I need a vote to recess.
No, I don't think we
Do
need,
we
you
need
you
it?
have the
Okay.
authority.
I have
to
the
recess.
authority.
You do.
The bill will be recessed until next Tuesday, I believe. Okay. Let's see, 10 o'clock. We have a few more minutes for 10 o'clock. There you go. At 10 o'clock, and we're opening the hearing on House Bill 361. And is Representative Noble here? Good. You're going to introduce the bill.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Kristen Noble. I represent Hillsborough District 2, the town of Bedford. For some of you, this will be the third time you're seeing this bill. This is the exact same language that passed the Senate last year. I bring this back again for a couple reasons: to protect students and school boards. We can't change what happened during COVID, but we can and we must prevent the same thing from happening again in the future. Schools have always been germ factories. Each year, we have cold and flu season. Some years are worse than others. We did not mask children in schools prior to 2020. And just because this is now the new normal for some people, doesn't mean we have to make this the new normal for students. The reason I bring this up is because there seems to be this idea out there that we can just do this now. There is no need for this to be a local decision. It would not be fair for one district to mandate masks and a neighboring district that lets it be up to individual choice. A virus that is dangerous enough to warrant masking is not likely to be localized to one school district. If there is a pandemic in the future, then the governor would likely issue a state of emergency, and her team at DHHS would make the decision on masking by doing a proper risk-benefit analysis for children. This takes a significant burden off school boards who really aren't qualified to be making these types of decisions. It also ensures that they will never again end up in the middle of two very vocal opinions on masks. No matter what decision a school board makes, they lose. They should never have that responsibility placed on them again. Last year and this year, a scenario was mentioned that if a student is immunocompromised, they would need their classmates to also wear a mask so that they could attend school. In that situation, I believe the school would do what they can to limit risk for that student. But it's never going to be zero, even if everyone wore a mask. If asked, some parents might agree to mask their children, but it shouldn't be forced because many kids have a very difficult time learning in a mask, among other problems. New this year, the House Education Policy Committee received a letter from Health and Human Services Division of Public Health. A couple of points from the letter state that decisions on face masks should be based on individual choice and information and informed by a person's own assessment and acceptance of risk from infectious diseases rather than from universal requirements. And individuals who are severely immunocompromised or who desire additional protection for themselves or a family member can choose to wear a face mask for their protection. And I brought copies of that letter for you. It is important to note that this bill does not prevent anyone from wearing a mask in school. And aside from a declared state of emergency in which the governor and her team make the call, the most local decision about masking children should lie with their parents. I am hopeful that our new governor understands this as well. I ask for your support, and hopefully Governor Ayotte will sign it, and I won't have to bring this to you again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions by the committee members? Senator Prentice.
Great. Thank you, Chair Ward. Thank you, Representative Noble. So, first question is, I hear your concern about the local school boards making these decisions, and I think what I heard from you is that maybe they're not, that you're concerned that they're not prepared or shouldn't be put in this position to do this. But what about, and I'm going to back this up a little bit, but school nurses or principals, given a certain, health crisis in that school, are they in a better position to make this decision? Like a principal in consultation, if we want to move it away from the school board, is there somebody locally that we want to leave this up to should there be a need for masking? and I'm not talking about COVID, I'm just talking about respiratory illnesses. I mean, there's other viruses that we close schools down for. So if we don't want to put the school board in that position, is your position school board or no one? Or is there somebody, a local authority who could rule on this?
Thank you for the question. I think in all of my years in school and my children in school, this was never even a question. It was never even considered. And there's been lots of viruses that have gone through. I do think that a decision like that is much better left with Health and Human Services.
Follow up?
Follow up.
Thank you, Representative Noble. So Health and Human Services statewide making a policy for the local school districts?
If it is bad enough, if that virus is bad enough to warrant a mask, then we are in a state of emergency. And yes, it would be Department of Health and Human Services working with probably the Department of Education to provide the school districts with what they need to be doing.
Follow up? Okay, so qualifying that with a state of emergency versus day to day. So, my daughter she's 28, she hasn't been in school in years, but I know how many viruses, respiratory illnesses, gastrointestinal viruses, all sorts of things that made it into our home that maybe wouldn't have made it into my home and others' homes if the schools had been more, say, conscious about, masking, hand washing, things that we know actually prevent, transmission of certain types of viruses. So I'm trying to find a way to ask you, given what you've what you've brought up and given my experience, is there some kind of middle ground so that we don't have to, this isn't about a state of emergency, but if a school is facing, because we hear schools will say, there's this terrible gastrointestinal virus and it's totally impacting attendance, or there is a flu-like virus. When talking about flu, it's really a respiratory virus, and it is teachers and students are ill. They are able, they close down now, or can close down or make those types of decisions. I'm just trying to figure out how to align this and give them that decision making. So if they think it's not a state of emergency, but they want to protect, from transmission between each other, this is a way, in my opinion, for them to do it. So I'm trying to understand, is there any middle ground on putting something into the hands of another authority besides the school board to address this at a non-pandemic level? I took you there the long way. You may need to think about it, but I'm trying to find a middle ground here because I don't want to completely strip this out. I don't think every time something like this happens, we should have to go to the Department of Public Health and say, can we get a state of emergency? And honestly, I wish they were more conscious of this stuff when my daughter was in school, because I can think of many days that, we all would have felt a lot better if the bugs hadn't come home from school. That's all.
Yeah, I don't see any problem with them making a recommendation. I have a problem with the mandate. I don't think it should be mandated.
Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative, for taking my question. I did a lot of research, as many people did during COVID, to figure out what was the best route to go if things were actually effective. The number one complaint that I heard during that time from parents was the masking. I was working on the preschool development grant at that time, and there were significant concerns about children not actually losing their ability to progress in their speech development because people's faces were masked. I share my colleague's concern. We had many times the norovirus ripped through our house, but in your research on this, did you find anything, I guess it's a two-part question, that said that this actually helped with the spread? Because I didn't see that it did, but also that children don't have the ability to actually mask properly, because we saw a lot of cloth masks, homemade masks that were used, reused, handled in improper fashions. Did you look into, the effectiveness of masks with children and children's use?
I did. I don't think that there's any evidence that this stopped or help to slow down the spread of COVID. I think there's probably more evidence that increase the spread. Children cannot properly wear masks. Adults cannot properly wear masks. I have seen that numerous times, including in this building, where people will come even to testify and sit here, take their mask off, put it down on the table, pick it back up, put it back on their face, transferring germs in either direction. So I don't think it's going to help. I think it's going to do a lot to spread germs.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Julie Smith. Julie?
Can I ask Representative one quick question?
Sure.
Sorry. Early morning, got in on an early morning flight, so I'm still addressing my caffeine needs, so thank you. Do you have a position from the Department of Education on this? Have they weighed in?
No.
Okay, because they have in the past, at least working with our former governor, so I'd be interested in what the Department of Education has to say.
Okay.
I have this thing about pointing my finger, sorry. I'll follow up.
Okay.
Thank you, Representative.
Okay.
Jordan. Yeah.
Thank you. Julie Smith. We have a number of people like to speak, so if you can keep your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Concentrated, sweet. Thank you.
I support this bill as I supported HB 1131 and 1093. Those bills went to Health and Human Services instead of Education, and I want this committee to familiarize itself with Dr. Petty's March 30th, 2022 expert testimony available in the YouTube video archives. Tricia should be able to get you the copies of the handouts he distributed that day if desired. Unlike Health and Human Services, this committee has no Nashua members, so let it be known for the record that it was the worst city when it came to all things COVID, and much of its local government is still in office today, and that includes the school board. Twice proving, because elections are in odd number years, that elections don't always solve problems. Just look at all those budget and spending cap bills coming from House Municipal as good examples. On March 20th, Senator Gray reminded 22 of his peers, all of you included, that New Hampshire is not a home rule state. When HB 1131 and 1093 were vetoed, the accompanying statement cited local control. Let's talk about that for a moment. SB 84 steamrolls desirable local controls of the good people in places like Ringe, all in the sacred name of housing. So it would stand to reason that, despite only 2 of you having voted for it, and across party lines, there are some matters which call for what the corporate world would call the open door policy. If you don't get satisfaction from your boss or HR, you go to your boss's boss, and so on. The attorney on this committee, though I did not know he would be absent, should agree that it is also how things work in that other branch of government. And about both other branches of government, we already know that the committee outcome will be 3-2. But there's more that this committee can do for this bill. And that's because the younger and sharper legal mind on this committee is, the legal mind on this committee is younger and sharper than that of the corner office. So please utilize it right now to discourage our new Nashua governor from following the Sununu path. And I'd also like to add that I ran into PK this morning and had an unplanned conversation with him just out in the reception area. And he had pointed out that if there is pushback, and again, without the lawyer being here, if there's pushback as far as legal muster goes, a possible amendment to solve the pushback is to make it so onerous and hard for a school board to impose masks, just make them jump through hoops. So that is something that you might want to keep on the back burner. And that's all I have to add. Thank you for the time.
Questions by the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much. Representative Timothy Horgan.
Thank you very much. I'm Representative Timothy Horrigan from Stratford County District 10, the town of Durham. So I'm opposed to this bill. Something I point out with a lot of these bills, which the drafters of this bill mostly thought of, was they did remember to include charter schools and public academies. So that's one good thing. They understandably haven't said anything about EFA or voucher recipients. So there might be the question whether we want to forbid schools that accept tuition to the voucher program, whether they should also be forbidden from having masks. However, that's not really my problem because I'm opposed to this bill. I think school board members may not be experts in public health, but they do have access to school nurses and other people who are trained in public health. And the evidence, I think the evidence shows, first of all, the COVID emergency was extremely serious. I've got about 1.2 million people died in the United States. That's about the population of New Hampshire. Here we go. And so New Hampshire, and then there were 618 cases, about 30% of the population caught COVID. The USA, yes, 1.2 million deaths, 103.4 million cases. So that was a very serious problem. So the masks, even though they weren't perfect, that was probably a reasonable reaction given the situation we were in 5 years ago. And it's COVID has actually not gone away. It's a lower level than it was before, and also like we're kind of not really tracking it. And if we had I'm afraid if we had a similar pandemic, at least in the next few years, don't think we would respond as aggressively, as effectively as we did in 2020. That's so I think the masks were not perfect, but they did keep a very bad situation from being even worse, even if people weren't using them perfectly. I mean, of course, that's an issue, and this is an issue we have to deal with. Any type of safety precaution, like does it have to be 100% perfect? Do people have to be using the devices perfectly 100% of the time for it to be worthwhile? And I would, my opinion, the answer to that is no. But in any case, and the data from 2020 shows there was also a lower level of other respiratory infections, like the seasonal flu was at low levels for the years of the pandemic. Although once again, during this winter season that just passed, and during the years, at least the next 3 years, we're not really going to be tracking that very effectively just because of cutbacks that have been made in various programs. But it's still so. I think the masks did work 5 years ago, and they would work if we ever admit that we have another such emergency. Okay. And I might finally add too. Although we've ramped up domestic production, back then they were produced in China, and now we're having a global trade war. So that could be another problem. I don't know whether that's good or bad, depending how you feel about the bill. But we probably won't be able to get plane loads of
Let's just keep
masks.
it to the use of masks.
Yes, so I think the
not
masks
tariffs.
were not perfect. People didn't use them perfectly, but they did keep a very serious respiratory epidemic from being even worse than it was. And so I think school boards should be allowed to mandate them if they see a problem with COVID or any other respiratory disease in their school. So they shouldn't have to wait for the governor to declare a state of emergency, which she might or might not do. So I would.
Thank you. Any questions by the committee members? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Paula Johnson. Paula Johnson.
That's me.
Good. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Paula Johnson. I'm a former member of the Board of Education twice in Nashua, former alderman at large and former state rep. I'm here today to ask you to please pass HB 361, prohibiting mandatory mask policies in school. I sat on the Board of Education during that horrible period of COVID. And we had parents coming in begging us not to keep the masks on the kids. And the science behind it said that children did not get COVID. Why would they have to wear masks? The sad thing was that not only this with the school, with our students, they chose to attack me also prior because I had a medical condition. I did file a complaint with Human Rights Commission regarding what happened to me, but I also filed a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights because children who could not wear masks were being forced to wear masks and they were violating their rights under ADA. So to mandate this without parents' consent is a horrible thing. And I saw it firsthand. And if anybody was in the school district seeing what happened with our kids, it was a tragic thing. Wearing masks, they lost their ability to socialize, to see masks on people. These are kids, they were traumatized. So I would ask you, please think about our students and don't let any school board or any bureaucratic agency demand that these masks should ever be put on these kids again. It is up to the parents whether or not they want their kids to have a mask. And I thank you for allowing me to speak today.
Thank you very much. Senator Prentice.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Ward. Thank you for taking my question. Thank you for your service in Nashua.
Thank
here
you.
At the state level. So you said that children don't get, I want to be clear. You said that children don't get COVID?
I remember all the studies. I went in there, every one of my meetings. Did all the research online, and they were talking about that children were not getting COVID. Children did not get COVID. It was more the elderly that was getting COVID. And the whole issue was you had to put a mask on to save Granny. And I remember that distinctly.
Follow up.
Thank you. And so I'm interested in what your data source is. I just quickly, looking at the Mayo Clinic, and it talks about that between 2020 and 2023, that children made up 18% of all people that had COVID in the United States. So it's a small percentage, but still it is there. But I want to share with you that I'm thinking about the larger, like COVID is going to become one of the different flus that we see during respiratory illness season. So I'm trying to think about this bill in a broader sense as to all respiratory illnesses, not just COVID. So do you have a position on that?
Well, it's funny you should ask that because when I was on the board, I brought in all the statistics because I did all my research. I did Google and everything. And I talked about the stomach viruses. I talked about flus. I talked about everything. And I said, the Norwalk virus that comes in after the cruise ship viruses, they say that is very contagious. Nobody ever maxed anybody up. And I would go round and round with the Department of Health and Human Services in Nashua. And I would say to her, you got your statistics, I got mine, and I brought it, I'm sorry, I didn't bring it today. That's okay. But if I would have realized the question, I would have. But believe me, I did all the research on all of that. And I remember talking about that in one of the meetings because they would bring up the COVID charts, how many people in Nashua were sick in the hospitals and all that. And then I went online and I looked at all the different illnesses that we've had over the years. Germs aren't bad for people. That's how you build your immune system up. I know I was one of the people that took very sick with the masks. And if you have kids with respiratory problems and they can't wear a mask, are you going to demand that they wear a mask in school or they can't come to school? And how are you going to say under ADA, you're going to say you're discriminating against them if they have to wear a mask and they can't wear a mask? So, there's a lot of things that you have to take into consideration here. And like I said, I did a lot of research on this because I was on the board. Not only did they make the children wear masks, I was being forced to do something that I could not do because of a medical condition.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Alchilla.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Honorable Johnson, for taking my question. Would you believe that New Hampshire actually saw children die of COVID during the pandemic?
It's sad to hear that. When I did my research, that did not come up. But can I ask you a question?
No, but no. The first death was September of 2021.
Okay. I guess my question then is, how many children die a year of respiratory problems with the flu? We all get very sick. We've never made mandating masks then. It was only during COVID that this mandate came in. Nothing for any other viral diseases that comes through. And I think just to tag this on COVID and to say that we have to have our children wear masks, that is wrong. And just think of the psychological problem it causes children. And we know from studies what happened to our students when they were not in school. There were kids committing suicide. They had a lot of mental breakdowns here. And I remember saying that to my board. And one of my former board members when I was on it, she's a state rep. And she wasn't very kind to me. She was one of the ones that went after me and the kids when I was on the board. And I would bring this up. And I brought it up one time that kids were committing suicide, and she shut me right down because she didn't want to hear that. So read the studies, because I never went into any of my meetings unprepared. I would come in with piles of papers, and I could flip through them and show my studies I did. Nobody else could on the board.
Okay, Ms. Johnson, could you provide us with the references to your studies?
I can go home and try to find them again. I
Okay.
can't guarantee anything
Okay.
because I condensed everything, and since I started throwing things out, but I do remember. If I can, should I send it to you,
Send
Senator?
it to the legislative aides here, and they will
Okay.
distribute it.
Is there a? Okay, if I can find it, I'll be more than happy to send it to
That
you,
would be very
Senator.
helpful.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Aubrey Friedman. Aubrey. So if you agree with everything that has been said, you can just say that, or if you have some new information, let us have it.
I haven't heard what's been said, but
Okay.
I've testified for this type of bill before. Obviously, Aubrey Friedman, Bridgewater, I'm totally in support of the bill. How about I just concentrate on one point? And we fought this in my school district, SAU 4, for close to a year, and we were told they will drop the mandate if the number of cases, and they kept track of it by school, 6 schools in our school district. When the number of cases goes down, we will drop it. We don't need it anymore. And the thing is, and they put this out publicly every week, the number of cases, everybody's wearing the mask because it's required, and the number of cases went up and up. So no, despite all the studies, we had studies showing the masks were no good, and the other side had masks showing that the masks were very effective. Look at the numbers. If they're going up every week, that tells you right there the masks are totally ineffective at stopping the spread. It was a big disaster. Hope we never have to go through this again, and that's why I support the bill.
Thank you very much. Any questions by the committee members? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Damon?
Excuse me. Good morning again. Thank you. For the record, State Representative Hope Damon, Sullivan District 8. I am here in strong opposition to this bill. I would ask everyone to please pause for a minute, try to step back from the very strong emotions that people on both perspectives on this bill have, largely from our concerns around pandemic experiences. It was a pretty rotten time, and there's a lot of baggage from that. But we need to consider what HB 361 is, and it is not, to me, a bill about COVID. It is a bill about local control. It is a bill about leaving all the options available for children to be able to attend school in person as much as possible while maintaining safety. I'm a retired healthcare professional. I want to make an observation that reading scientific studies is not like reading Dr. Seuss. I don't mean that facetiously. You really have to know how to read science and critique a study to consider whether the conclusions of it are valid. Was there a control group and a study group? Was there an adequate sample size? Did the sample size represent the population that is being reported on? Was it peer reviewed by folks who have the expertise in what a good study design is? I will not go on and on about it, but to say that I've done the research and I've read all the studies and I didn't find anything to support the credibility of masking does not suggest to me an understanding of how scientific studies work and how to critique them and draw a valid conclusion. The science around the value of masking to prevent spread of disease is very, very strong. Yes, numbers went up while kids were wearing masks at school because there's a whole lot of variables in the picture of what causes disease transmission. Just because you wore a mask at school didn't mean you wore a mask everywhere else. Didn't mean that you were safe in other environments. So it's simplifying things greatly to just say, well, the mask didn't work because the numbers went up, but it's just not a very complete evaluation. So, as you've read, HB 361 prohibits school districts and chartered public schools from adopting, enforcing, or implementing mask policies. It overrides local control, and it doesn't look at, or doesn't allow looking at, the considerable variation between localities. Why would we want a mask mandate if we ever were to think it made sense in some locality? Why would we want the whole state, children in all schools, to need to do that? If it's one part of the state that has an extensive presence of disease, it simply doesn't make sense to say it has to be a statewide application. Conditions can vary greatly locally. As a healthcare professional, I know that science is constantly evolving. We make decisions with what we know and understand at a given point in time. Changes in recommendations can be frustrating and confusing. I could give you boatloads of examples of that from my nutrition career, but I'll spare you. But just think eggs, good, bad, indifferent, choose your decade, you can get the answer because we keep learning. Currently, good. During COVID, the virus itself changed, the rates of infection in communities fluctuated, and experts adjusted guidance as new knowledge became available. That is the uncomfortable but also wonderful reality of science. As we keep learning, our approaches to wellness evolve. This bill ignores the reality that we have learned so much since 2020. I would be confident that no school district would impose a mask mandate without very, very thorough, deliberate evaluation of the current circumstances at the time that might be considered and the current science. None of us has a reliable crystal ball. We cannot predict future challenges. We simply cannot know whether it would be valuable to require masking someday in the future. We have only to see the spread of measles, a highly contagious viral disease that we thought had been eradicated in the US, from a small area in Texas to now cases coast to coast, to understand that infectious diseases will occur. Currently in the US right now, we have 3 times as many cases of measles in these first 3 months of 2025 as we had in all of last year. To be clear, I am not saying that we should be masking to prevent measles, locally or statewide, although individuals might want to know that it is a viral disease and it is, you are somewhat protected by a mask from it. So for those who are at high risk, that might be a consideration. I am simply using that, however, as an example that conditions change over time and knowledge changes over time. We need to continue to allow our elected local school boards and school medical staff the freedom to respond to health emergencies according to the needs of their local community and we must make our decisions based on facts, not fear. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions by the committee members? Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Representative Damon. Would you believe, and I know this bill is not about COVID, but that is where this practice became more widely utilized
True.
in schools, and probably for a number, and I think back again, when my daughter was in school, I think about what respiratory illnesses may not have come home, had that option been available. But that being said, the National Institutes of Health says that proper masking, and I know proper masking is a conversation, basically was responsible for the transmission rate was dropped by 87% with proper masking policies. Would you believe that that is fair and accurate?
Yes, I would, because I know that the National Institutes of Health is a research-based, trusted entity that uses science factually. And I would also, if I may, appreciate you commenting, Senator, about the question of how masks are worn. And I think that's one of the things that we know a whole lot more about now than we did in 2020 and 2021. There are way better, more comfortable, different styles of masks than what were commonly available at the onset of the pandemic. And there are masks, probably most people have seen them, with transparent sort of nose mouthpieces. I mean, you can see how people speak. You can see expression. You can see a smile. I mean, there are a lot of ways that if we did need to or choose to wear masks, we could help people to wear them more effectively and more productively.
Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question. And I hate to contradict my colleague because I respect her so much. But when it comes to NIH and other science is, we like to talk about settled science. There is no settled science. Science changes all the time. So in NIH, I also found a study that said conclusions, real world effectiveness of child mask mandates against SARS-CoV-2 transmissions or infection has not been demonstrated with high quality evidence. The current body of evidence of data does not support masking children for protections against COVID-19. So when it comes down, you're a medical professional. Would you agree that when it comes to children, the bigger risk for spreading any virus or disease is their hands? They share everything, and they eat food, and then they're sharing things again. And in a school environment, they have lunch where they take off their mask, right? And they're sitting across from each other. But isn't it the concentration should be on their hand cleanliness more than masking?
Thank you for the question. It's a good question. I don't think it's either or. So children, for sure, and for that matter, adults, hands are messy little things. You can't see the viruses and bacteria on them, but they are there, and hand washing is an extremely valuable tool for decreasing disease transmission. And so I would never oppose strong education and encouragement to, hey kids, I mean, I actually remember my kid's second grade teacher had the kids queue up and line up, and they all wash their hands before lunch every day. And I thought, well, now isn't that a thoughtful thing to do? Well, maybe they washed them thoroughly, maybe not, but they at least encountered water. It's a start. But I don't think it's either or. I don't think we say hand washing will be enough, therefore we'll never need masks. I think we'd like to never need masks, and that might well be true. We simply can't know.
Thank you.
Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Damon, for taking my question. So earlier in your testimony, you talked about House Bill 361 not being a COVID bill, but a bill about local control. And is it your recollection that school boards consult with local health departments and public health networks before making decisions that affect the entirety of their district? They're
Thank you
not
for the-
made in a vacuum, right?
Thank you for the question. And yes, I would absolutely agree that that is what would happen. And in fact, if the bill were not to be defeated, to have it be amended to say school districts may make a policy based on input from, and we could specify appropriate entities. I was not a state rep during COVID, but in my rep district now, I have a 9-town flotarial. There are 5 school districts that are within those towns. And I've spoken with staff in all of those districts about this concept, and the consensus is very much the school nurse, the consulting physician, Dartmouth Health, which is pretty much everywhere, that they would, and the State Department of Health, that they would look to the experts to recommend how to approach things.
May I follow up?
Follow up?
Thank you. So is it now your testimony that local health departments, public health networks work in consultation and collaboration with other municipal and elected bodies like school departments?
Yes.
Thank you.
Senator Prentice?
Thank you, Chair Ward, Representative Damon, for actually, I don't have to wear a question, but I just, this is not a COVID bill, or this isn't about masks related to COVID. It's about all, and I just want to clarify, and put it on the record because I respect my colleagues and my colleague on the committee about the National Institute of Health. I misspoke. I did not age adjust my data. So my data was for all ages. Age adjusted, it's lower, it's in the 70s, but I mean, I think that we could go back and forth on that. Again, I want to get away from COVID and look at the broader implications. And I think if they're going to be used, would you think it's fair, following up on what Senator Altschuler just said, and I had brought this up earlier with the sponsor of the bill, to shift the decision-making about this away from the school board and to a school nurse and a principal in consultation with, say, the public health networks or someone at the Department of Health, because we don't want to raise every time there's a situation up to the level of a state of emergency. There's like intermediate and there's local public health crises. Do you think that that's a fair approach potentially to this?
Yes. I think obviously school board composition varies in communities. You might have a physician on a school board, a nurse, you might or might not have medical professionals, but they might not be people who are infectious disease specialists. Putting it at the level of the school administration in consultation with appropriate public health and infectious disease people makes sense to me. I would agree.
And again, I did not age adjust my data, so I apologize for that. Thank you.
All set. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Leah Belisco?
Good morning. Leah Walchko, Manchester, New Hampshire. I was a teacher at a middle school in Manchester when the virus escaped the lab. Now we're told by the NIH and other agencies. So I lived through the whole thing, and I want to talk about 3 kids. These are real kids that I saw with my own eyes, not hypothetical children, but real children that I dealt with every day. The first one was a special ed. She was mainstream, but she was coded. She had some special ed needs. And I saw her one day in the room that the special ed caseworker was able to take them into and do their help them in the ways they needed to. And she was distraught. She was crying. She was inconsolable. And I asked the special ed worker what was going on with her. And she said that she was so terrified. She was so fear-stricken that she was non-functional. She couldn't stay in her classes anymore. And she specifically said, and I quote, "The masks are too much for her." So we wore the masks because we were afraid. We're talking about wearing them again out of being afraid. And so we shouldn't be surprised that they project fear. They visually show, especially young, anxiety ridden, which many of them are, children, that there's something to be very scared of. And they see it everywhere. It's on every face. So that little girl was hurt badly by these masks. There was another little girl that was my student that after it got so hot that they just couldn't wear them anymore. And so they were told they didn't have to wear them anymore. So the virus is still there, but it's just so hot they're going to pass out. She kept it on. And so I was walking up the set of stairs with her and I asked her, does your mom want you to wear that? No, she gets mad at me if I wear it. I'm like, oh, are you still really scared that you'll catch the virus and get sick? No, I've never been scared of that. And I'm like, well, then why do you have it on? It's 100 degrees in here. And she said, because no one talks to me when I have it on. I don't know if you remember going into the grocery stores, us as adults, while we were walking with those things on. Could you feel the difference in the way you interacted with other human beings? It was almost like you were there alone. No one made eye contact. No one talked to anybody. Well, that's what happens with these kids when they have that mask on. They're hidden. It's like an amplified version of wearing your hair in your face and a hoodie on and trying to disappear. That is pathological. And that was happening across the board. The other one I want to talk about is a boy that was in the room next to me. And obviously I don't know if it was on purpose or by accident, but the way that he had that mask seated on his face terrified further the teacher that was in there in that room. And the screaming and the name calling and the insulting nature that he spoke to that boy and others. It was horrifying. You could hear it through the walls. You could hear it all day long. What we had was a fear factory where everybody was so afraid that they were irrational. And I don't know what the effect was on that boy, on how he felt about school going forward in the years after that, but I bet it would be a measurable decline. And there were so many stories that I could tell you that we could be here all day. So here's the thing. There's no solutions. There's only trade-offs. There's no solution. Do we want school boards to be put, and I don't care, I'm saying school board, principal, district, school districts, do we want them to be put in the position where they have to make these decisions and then deal with the fallout that they can't win? If some kid catches it and they didn't have a mask mandate, they could be, it's your fault. Or if my little child now is nonverbal at 3-4 years after one of these things takes place, and we trace it back to the fact that you put those masks on her face, they can't win. What we need is the most cool-headed, collected, rational, deliberative process that we can possibly envision. And it's not the school nurse. Okay, the school nurse doesn't have time to sit and read studies from peer-reviewed journals all day. She's out straight. So I ask you to recognize that there is no way to keep your child safe. You cannot keep the norovirus out of your house. It can't be done. And if we desire to try to keep all these viruses out of our houses, and we make decisions that hurt one way or another 50-60% of our student body, that is not a reasonable trade-off. And you know what I don't understand? I get people saying, oh, local control, local control. Normally I'd like that. But vaccine mandates are not controlled locally. It is a medical intervention that needs to be uniform across the state. These masks change the blood gas in anyone wearing them. They are a medical device, and I saw with my eyes they had health effects on the people that had to wear them. So because it's a medical device that has downside risk, I don't think it is appropriate that it should be town by town, district by district. I think that any child in New Hampshire should not have to have any medical intervention unless every child is told they have to go to school.
Thank you. Any questions? Senator Sullivan?
I think Senator Brenda said her microphone on first.
Oh, rock, paper, scissors.
Shoot.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. So, and thank you for coming this morning.
You're welcome.
So, and taking my question. So, right now, we're not talking about immunizations. We're not talking about masking for COVID. We're just talking about respiratory transmission. And I know I brought up norovirus, but that, hand washing is an effective way to keep that out of your home. That being said, right now, schools, there are decisions being made at schools to shut down a school to give a cool-off period, say after a certain virus, not again COVID, but let's say a norovirus has made it into that school. So I'm trying to understand what the difference is between them right now being able to say, we just need a couple of days to get everybody healthy, to disinfect and get them back here into a productive educational environment versus these high absentee rates and transmission. So that already exists. So how do you disagree with that? And how do you see it transferring potentially to the mask side?
No, the schools already have the authority to close. They make decisions whether the weather is bad enough, whether if there's a problem with the asbestos falling down. There are going to be local decisions made that this is no longer really a safe place right now. We need to close it for a day or two. That's different than imposing a medical interface on a child. Telling every child go home and take 2 days off doesn't do them any harm. There's the difference. You're harming kids by putting these masks on their face. My niece is years behind in school, years behind because of what happened during those 2 years during COVID. And then they're just being pushed along. And she's years behind. So real damage is done versus what you're talking about. You have 2 days off for a snow day. You have 2 days off for flu days. You have 2 days off because too many teachers are out and we have to shut down the place for a day or two. No harm is done. So there's no trade-off.
Yeah, quick follow-up. So I didn't talk, for the record, I didn't talk about school days. I talked about a medical situation. Whether it is the local, I think what I heard in the beginning of your first response to my question was that the schools already do have an authority to make these decisions. Okay, and then there's a difference, and I'm listening to what you're saying between whether it causes harm or not based on the kind of situation, but there is decision-making capacity at the local level for some of these cases. Not snow days, but
Right.
medically related.
Right.
Okay, that I just, okay.
Yeah, I mean that's if there was something raging through a school and they felt they had to close it for a day or two, I don't think this bill stops that. They still have that ability.
It's the local component of the conversation, but I appreciate
You're welcome.
taking my question
You're
and
welcome.
responses.
Senator Sullivan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question. Thank you for your service to our children.
Thank you.
So we're hearing a lot about the professionals on the local level. Isn't it true that the professionals on the local level are the ones that made the decisions that we're now seeing have harmed children so dramatically, including the continued learning loss
Yeah, yes, they made those decisions at the local level, and they were too afraid to be able to make rational decisions about really anything. They didn't have the capacity to sit back and look at it in a clinical mindset. They were scared, senseless, and schools have so much to deal with as it is. We can barely manage, as is evident from so many ways that we measure success at the school levels. This is not something that they have the capacity to be able to deal with. And without further degrading the quality of the service provided to the student, the whole place is built for.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Anybody else in the audience who wants to chime in on House Bill 361? Seeing none, this concludes the hearing on House Bill 361. We'll open the hearing on, what?
I did ask Elena Fenton to see if the Department of Education has a position on this.
Okay. 361. She wants to speak on this bill?
You want me to see if they're outside?
Okay, bring her in. Well, these. I think this lady wants to.
Yes, I would like to.
On the what?
Laura Chesney. There's what? Oh, I'm right here. I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Hi. Okay, I will try. I narrowed it down. Okay. Well, I will try to keep this short. I'll try to stick to my main points, but I do want to say, as a parent, my children have asked me to come here and speak about their personal experiences with wearing the mask. One of my children has asthma and was unable to breathe during gym class with a mask. Two of my other children have reading disabilities. And with that being said, I'm going to move into my points. In April of 2023, due to 51% of New Hampshire's fourth grade students not reading at proficiency, the governor of New Hampshire and the executive council approved $936,340 in federal funds for teachers, parents, and caregivers participating in a training called LETTERS, Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling. This professional development training program was grounded in the science of reading and was developed by Dr. Louisa Moats, Carol Tolman, and other leaders in the field of literacy. One of the primary reasons that New Hampshire decided to use this program can be found in a quote on the New Hampshire section of the Lexia Letters website. The Department of Ed aims to support literacy recovery needs resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. A primary goal of the Leaning into Literacy initiative is to boost the level of literacy supports throughout New Hampshire. So this program is accredited by the International Dyslexia Association and focuses on teaching teachers, parents, including homeschooling parents and caregivers, how to teach the skills to provide a foundation for reading and writing instruction. Yes. I know, sorry, I'll try to. I'm going to focus on phonological awareness, which is defined as the conscious awareness of all levels of the speech sound system and the ability to identify, count, and manipulate the parts of words, including syllables, onsets, and rhymes, and phonemes. A phoneme being the smallest segment of speech that can be combined with other speech sounds to make a word or determine a word's meaning. And I will try to jump in here. So part of teaching phonemic awareness involves ensuring that students' attention is first focused on speech sounds. We use our throat, lips, teeth, tongue, and airflow from our lungs to produce speech sounds. This program teaches teachers how to encourage their awareness of their mouth by teaching them to describe where in their mouth their tongue is, feel or notice how the air is flowing from their mouth, looking at their mouth and the teacher's mouth to determine how sounds are being made. Skilled teachers of phonological skills make a conscious effort to apply these research-based principles that this program teaches. They model these strategies to students with their own mouths while also helping students to notice what their mouths are doing as they produce sounds. In order to truly model proper speech sounds to children, and to teach children how to notice and make these sounds on their own, it makes sense that a skilled teacher should also have their mouth visible, and the child must be able to receive proper feedback on the formation of the sounds. In order for New Hampshire to truly follow the science of reading and to continue in our efforts to support literacy recovery needs, and also to ensure that the federal funds designated for this much needed task of improving reading instruction are not wasted, the wearing of face coverings must remain optional and should never again be mandated by school boards.
Thank you. That gives a good reason for it. Questions by the committee members? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Do you want to ask a quick question? By that, Diane?
Oh, no. I asked her to check with the Department of Education.
Oh, okay.
To see if they had a position on
Okay.
this bill, because I have a recollection of the commissioner and the governor either making a statement or when there's something out there in the past that makes me think DOE may have a position on this. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
This concludes the hearing on House Bill 361. Now we're moving on to House Bill 50. You can have this. The Representative Ferrigino.
Petrino. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. I'm State Representative Peter Petrino from the town of Milford, and I'm here to present House Bill 50, but the bill before you is not the one that I originally filed. My understanding, the underlining bill that I filed was to repeal the statute known as the Right to Freedom from Discrimination in Public Workplaces and Education, sometimes referred to as the Divisive Concepts Law. However, it was amended in the House to retain the existing law and adding the provision to allow persons aggrieved by the intentional or knowing violations of the law to initiate civil action against offending schools or school districts and as a violation of the Educator Code of Conduct. However, this past summer, a federal court ruled the law unconstitutional, violating teachers' First Amendment rights and 14th Amendment by being too vague and potentially leading to arbitrary enforcement. And as such, I hope that we would be able to repeal the law. I can only assume that the amended version was an attempt to address the court's ruling, but you'll have to ask them their intent. Now, I have objected to this law from its inception because I believe it's detrimental to meaningful education. There are 4 provisions, but the one provision that I find most troubling is provision B. I believe its intent is to silence teachers' voices on topics that some just don't want discussed. Now, provision B says, no pupil in any public school shall be taught that an individual or group is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive. But of course, there are individuals and groups which are racist, sexist, and oppressive. The law simply denies reality, and it makes it difficult for teachers and students to engage in appropriate and relevant lessons. So my hope is that the underlining bill is restored and that we finally repeal this law. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for hearing me.
Representative Cordelli?
Thank you very much. Once again, Representative Glenn Cordelli, representing Tuftonboro, Wolfboro, and Ossipee in the beautiful Lakes region. And I am here in support of the amended House Bill 50. This issue, as you heard, is in the federal courts. It's in the First Circuit. And the amended bill was or is intended to address some of the issues raised in New Hampshire courts. And there are a number of issues that were raised in that decision that I wanted to address and point out specifics in the amended bill. First, we heard about vagueness. That issue was addressed in a number of ways. In Romans 4 and 5, you'll see the words intentional or knowing was added. This is known as a scienter, which in Black's law is defined as the degree of knowledge that makes a person legally responsible for consequences of their action or omission. And that was pointed out in the ruling by the judge. Also in the judge's ruling, he did not agree with this, but he did point out that in a United States versus Neves Castano bill, the court, and I quote from his ruling, the court emphasized the importance of the statute's scienter requirement by stating that the defendant could only have been convicted if she knew or reasonably should have known that her possession of a firearm was within a school zone. And this scienter requirement eliminates any vagueness concerns. So that language is intended to partially address the vagueness concern. In addition, and that is on page 31 of his decision, and I can send you the decision if you so choose. Also, I wanted to address, there was, I think, just mentioned a provision in the law about inherently superior. And the actual language from the bill states that one's age, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, race, creed, color, marital status, familiar status, mental or physical disability, religion, or national origin is inherently superior to people of those same characteristics. And
Cadelli, where
yes,
are you reading this?
I'm reading it from the current law.
Okay.
I'm
Because
sorry.
You mentioned page 3, and I don't.
Right, page 3, page 37
I
of
don't
the
have a
judge's
page
ruling, which I can send to you if you so
Okay.
choose.
Okay, great.
So that language is in the current statute, and the provision is that no pupil in any public school in the state shall be taught, instructed, inculcated, or compelled to express belief in or support for any one of the following, and the inherently superior is one of them, as is that one of those groups is inherently racist, or that we should not attempt to treat others without regard to their age, sex, and so forth. So the inherently superior is addressed partially also in Roman 3 in the amended bill, which talks about prohibitions on instruction relating to members of any particular racial group. And it goes on to mention several, including but not limited to white people, which was raised in the judge's decision. Also, on page 23 of his decision, the defendants have not attempted to interpret the concept beyond reiterating its prohibition when discussing inherently superior. As he goes on to say, it is unclear what is prohibited beyond literally espousing that, for example, white people are superior to black people. I would hope that everyone would agree that that is a bigoted statement that white people are superior to black people, just as it would be for to say that black people are superior to white people. I also mentioned that in the amended bill, it repeats that nothing is construed in the bill to prohibit discussion by educators in a larger course of discussion the historical existence of ideas and subjects in this area, which could include slavery, the Civil War, etc. And I would point out then the last sentence in Roman 4, the intent of this section is to equally protect all New Hampshire citizens from discrimination regardless of race. So I think that this amended bill is an intent to lay out some responses to the judge's ruling in New Hampshire, and also to identify and reaffirm the what's in current law in terms of one race or sex, et cetera, being inherently superior to the other, et cetera. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Questions? Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Chair Ward, and thank you, Representative Cordelli, for always taking my questions. So
Sure.
number one, your replace all amendment for the representative, I don't want to mispronounce your name. Okay, so we're going to leave it at that. This is your attempt to tailor the language based on the the decision that came down from the courts?
I
use that word tailor specifically.
It was to address the concerns raised by the judge, in part.
Second follow-up? Okay, thank you for that. You know, it struck me in thinking about this in the last couple of days, and then I just pulled it back up. One of the key concerns, you know, when I look at this language and I look at, I think about the penalty, you know, that there is a penalty associated with this. And I know you've put intentional or knowing violation, that somebody could lose their license. If they violate the code of conduct, then they could basically lose their job and not be able to teach. Is that correct?
That is the most extreme remedy within the code of conduct.
Okay. So lastly, going back to there was a study committee on, and Senator Ward, you were on this, looking at the shortage of educators in New Hampshire. Like, I can remember days when you couldn't get a job. Like, I know so many people who prepared. I went to St. Michael's College, and it was a big educational college. They wanted to teach. They couldn't get a job teaching. And there are now like help wanted signs out in front of schools and schools districts. But in this, and it was in a number of places, and it came to me after talking to a constituent, and not recently, but probably within the last year, is that teachers are saying, look, the culture has changed. The culture has changed in schools, and it is stressing us to a point where we have to worry about everything that we say because we might lose our job. So this extreme remedy and this finding in this report, they seem, well, what it does is actually, it backs up what the report says, is that they're afraid that they're going to lose their job. And I feel like Representative thank you, Representative Peter, trying to back this up or clarify within his version, which was initially introduced, page 1, 6 through 9, or 6 through 8, talking about scientifically supported information and concepts. And then it goes on, regarding differences among groups, puts that, puts a target rate on where, what the teachers, I believe, are already doing and should be doing, which is, teaching what has evidence behind it in the classroom. So I'm just trying to, one, you say this is tailoring because of the courts. Two, bring up the fact that we have a shortage of educators. We studied it. We've made recommendations, and their findings. One of the big findings is that there's a lot of stress in the classroom because an extreme remedy, if there should be a disagreement about what they say, is that they could lose their job. And I see that the representative here has tried to tailor this to the scientifically supported. So why can't we stay there? Or maybe I'm missing something. So help me out, Representative Cordelli.
I think that the original bill was also a repeal of much of this language, which I vehemently disagree with. I think it's definitely needed, and we've seen that in this state and around the nation. We've seen it in Manchester just recently with this so-called wheel of power and privilege. And the instruction to staff to basically not say anything about what's going on. So I think that and you talked about the culture changing, I think the culture has changed in society, and in many, many ways, not for the better. I can't address the greater culture quite yet, but I'll try. But this is trying to really outline what we feel is proper in terms of discrimination in general and not discriminating against anyone. And that's what we stated, as I said, in Roman 4, in the amended bill, that everyone should be treated equally. And I think that the culture within the schools, I think that there has been a intent to raise concern among staff, because when the bill was first passed, when the bill was first introduced, I think there was an intent to raise concerns among the staff. And I think in large part needlessly. We just want an honest representation of history when it comes to race, sex, everything in those classes to be honestly discussed with our students.
Okay. Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative, for taking my question. Timely bill. Spent most of my weekend talking to my constituents over that incident that happened in Manchester, where 8th grade students were given a wheel of power and privilege, which considerably upset parents on all spectrums. I live in a multicultural city. And white children were told that they have privilege over black children, and black children were told that they were marginalized and they couldn't get a leg up basically in society. This is so hurtful and painful, for especially to put this on kids. With these changes, are there other changes that we need to make in order to make this hold up according to the judgment of the court?
The Senate did pass a bill that was in this section of law 19340 that addressed Roman numeral 1 and added intentional or knowing in that Roman numeral 1, which was missed in this amendment. So we are looking at that bill and looking to see if there's anything else that needs to be maybe amended to that bill. But I think that and appreciate the Senate passing that bill on to us since we missed that Roman 1 requirement that we should have put in there.
Thank you.
Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Cordelli, for taking my question.
Sure.
So I'm looking at lines 6 and 15 as how they relate to each other. So scientifically supported information that we know is that the economic structure of this country was based upon enslavement of African Americans. And the justification for doing that was that white people or people of European descent believed that they were indeed superior. So that's taught.
I'm sorry.
That is taught in classes. That is true fact. And if we go to 15, any person claiming to be aggrieved now can launch a complaint against the school or the school district and threaten a teacher's credentials potentially, and seek relief from the school district for teaching what is actually real American history. And while this is all moving its way through the courts, we are, putting a teacher's career in jeopardy. We are roiling up unnecessary strife within the school. Do you not see how a claim is something that, that you bring to Superior Court for teaching history is a chilling thing to do?
I would say that I don't know if anyone is going to file a claim. And anytime you go to court, it's a claim, okay? I don't know if anyone's going to file a claim because someone is teaching history. They're going to, as specified in here, aggrieved by intentional or knowing violation of this section, intentionally saying that white people have privilege over black people, or black people are marginalized, as the senator just pointed out in that document from Manchester, to 8th grade students. I think that's a perfect example of why this amended bill is needed.
Follow up?
A short follow-up. And
Thank you.
We're
So
not going to have debate the value of, just address the issue with the bill.
So you've just addressed that this would possibly go to court, but you don't know if anyone may make it. But this bill puts in place a space for people to take their grievances straight to Superior Court, not go through a process with their schools, not have those conversations with the teachers, not get clarification about, I don't think I understood what my student is bringing home. I don't think my student understands. This doesn't sound right to me. Can you explain it? All of those things that keep school communities, functioning communities, now are set up to be instantly acrimonious. And do you not see how this bill in this space, lines 15, jumps over anything that might build community and launches people straight into court?
I would think that we've seen in a number of instances around the state where parents have gone to the school and asked for clarification. Why is this being done? I'm not sure if that has happened in Manchester, but I would hope that would be the first step. But I think that there needs to be steps beyond the first step also.
Really? Short one. No debate.
I'm not debating. Thank you for taking my question. On that subject, would you believe that the parents did go to the school and they were absolutely, their concerns were dismissed by them, and that's why it escalated to where it is today?
I do believe that, and I had heard something to that effect, but thank you for that. And it's a shame that, speaking of culture, that in society today, that we have to deal with an issue like this, and Manchester has to deal with that issue. After all the discussion that's been had, it's really a shame.
Thank you very much, Representative Codelli.
Thank you.
Is Representative Horrigan around here? Timothy Horrigan? Okay, you've heard what has been said, so try to not repeat, just address the bill.
Thank you. I'm Representative Timothy Horrigan from Stratford County District 10, which is the town of Durham, which actually is the home of UNH. And if you believe we're in a post, I mean, this is the Senate, not the House, but there's some things going on in the House which are racially tinged, which are being directed at the institution, the largest institution in town, which is UNH. But that's, so at least that's something I'll say that's new. And I'll try not to repeat myself too much, although, you know, it's hard to avoid repeating ourselves. I marked down that I was opposed, which I believe is what Representative Petrino marked down. Actually, my preference would be to amend the bill back to how it was introduced, because the amendment that was passed on party lines by the Education Policy Committee basically does the exact opposite of what the prime sponsor and the co-sponsors intended, which I guess is allowed under the rules. It's kind of not a very nice thing to do, but it has happened before. It's happened to me, and actually I would have wanted to be one of the House co-sponsors, but I just didn't end up with my name in the masthead. But I would have been very proud to have been one of the co-sponsors. As you guessed from looking at me from my name, I identify as white. The Horrigan side of my family came over the mid-19th century, so some of them did fight in the Civil War, either on the Union side or Confederate side. But my mother's side is one of the old families, goes back to colonial times, and my ancestors, I think a lot of them were pretty amazing people, but they were racist. They probably thought they were just being pragmatic for the most part, but our country, slavery in particular, is a big part of our country. Other forms of racial oppression are a big part of our history, and this bill, as amended, tries to prevent educational institutions from teaching that, and that's simply a fact. We don't live in a post-racial society. I'm probably about the same age as the representative who just spoke. So I was born in 1956. I'm 68. I think society has generally been getting much better over the decades. At least I'm not so happy about a lot of things that have been happening over the last 3 months. I kind of feel in some sense we're going back to the 50s, not the 1950s, but actually the 1850s. So I'm personally extremely troubled by that, even though I also know, like, I've had a pretty privileged life, and I think my skin color has indeed had a lot to do with my privileged life. And and I'm not entirely happy about it. And I think children of whatever racial background, whatever their ancestry is, should be taught the truth about our country, not just the good parts, but the bad parts. So I'm just very troubled by some of the developments of the last 3 months, but many of which I think are indeed very racist. But this bill, in all fairness, has a very low number. That's because it was filed back in September, before we first of all knew who was going to win the election and what he would do. We didn't realize he was going to do exactly what he was promising to do during the campaign. But anyway,
I think we're talking about, you're not
Yes.
talking about the bill, you're talking about this present political.
Oh, well, yes, we're a political body. Like, the political climate is that's relevant to your decision about what to do with this bill. So I would say you should either kill this bill, leave the law the way it is, or take what I think the excellent suggestions that the prime sponsor and the co-sponsors presented to the House. So, and I would also just parenthetically add, I believe RSA 354 is about the Human Rights Commission, which is a state body. That's a state body which may or may not survive the budget process. It's got a huge number of operational problems. So another good thing about passing the bills introduced is that gives that commission fewer things to do. It's having a hard enough time doing even what it's already doing. So that would make life easier for the Human Rights Commission too. So I would just,
That's a different bill.
okay, well, I believe that is the I believe that is the RSA, and if I'm wrong, I apologize. But so I would just urge. So ideally, I would say don't just go back to the original bill as introduced and see what happens in the conference committee, and failing that, either table this bill or ITL it on the floor. But I would definitely say, what came out of the Education Policy Committee is just it's just not workable, not a good idea, and so I would urge you to kill it. And by the way, the parents in my district, they support teaching their children regardless of their racial background.
Thank you.
Every parent I've talked to supports teaching our children the truth about our history and not a sugar-coated version thereof. So thank you.
Any questions from the committee members? Seeing
All right,
none,
thanks.
thank you very much. Tiffany Campbell.
John Mahal. Oh, sorry.
Okay, you've heard everything, right?
I'm sorry?
That's it, you've heard everything. Just give us your version or summarize if you have something different to say.
I do. Thank you.
Okay.
First, good morning, Chairwoman and members of the Senate Education Committee. Thank you for taking my testimony. My name is Tiffany Campbell. I am from Ware, and I hold a PhD in philosophy. My focus is on bioethics and disability. I am here to express my concern about HB 50, and as amended, I am strongly opposed. While HB 50's original intent to protect honest and fair instruction about discrimination was critical, the intentional or knowing violation and civil suit provisions now create a very real alarming effect. As someone who was taught bioethics and the histories of systemic injustice in another state, I can tell you that educators are already very hesitant to address sensitive issues, topics like medical bias or forced sterilizations, even when these subjects are very well documented. Under the amended bill, a single aggrieved individual or the Attorney General could file suit for discussing, say, the Tuskegee experiments or disability sterilization programs. The risk of being investigated or sanctioned will deter teachers from covering these subjects at all. The bill's emphasis on racial groups in Part 3 omits other protected categories like disability, gender, or socioeconomic status. As a former bioethics instructor, I've seen how medical bias against disabled patients often stems from the same historical practices as those against racial minorities. If disability histories lose protection, entire swaths of critical content vanishes from the classroom. When future doctors and nurses don't learn why, for example, Black and Indigenous women distrust the medical system, or why disabled patients fear institutional mistreatment, they can't build the trust and understanding needed for safe, equitable care. In my classroom, students who engaged fully with these histories discussed their intentions to design better informed clinical protocols and policies. Most of my students were pre-med, pre-nursing, and policy, public policy, health policy. Whoops, I'm sorry. HB 50's current language would undermine that transformative learning. Because of these provisions, I would be reluctant to even consider teaching in this state. And to be clear, I am currently looking for work. I can't in good faith teach bioethics or disability history without fear of disciplinary sanctions. That hesitation will ripple outward, denying New Hampshire students the very context they need to become compassionate, competent professionals. I believe HB 50 must be refined to remove the intentional or knowing violation penalties,
broaden protections to all protected groups and clarify that academic discussion grounded in historical evidence is never subject to civil or disciplinary action. And thank you for your consideration, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you. Questions?
Thank you.
Seeing none, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
That concludes the hearing, unless there's somebody else in the audience who likes to speak. Welcome up.
Chair Ward and members of the Education Committee, thank you very much for taking my testimony. I wasn't sure whether I would speak or not, but I hope it's a different version of this discussion. I am Michelle Vesey. I am the Advocacy Director for New Hampshire Businesses for Social Responsibility. We have over 250 member businesses across the state, businesses that excel in manufacturing, like Hypertherm and Sertronics, are members of our organization. We are in need of a future workforce that can think critically, that can address systems challenges, and that is all based on an education that allows them to fully understand and learn from our history. So a bill such as this, where teachers are discouraged from telling the truth, from helping students develop their own understanding of our history, is really shortchanging our students and our futures. We feel like it's very important to have a workforce that's going to be able to help our businesses thrive. We were asked by our businesses in 2020 to develop a program around diversity, equity, inclusion to help the business community understand the issues. Being concerned about our students having their feelings hurt or possibly not feeling comfortable understanding about America's past is again shortchanging our students. We all need to understand the mistakes and the great things that our country has offered us over history. And so we ask that you do not support this amendment as it stands, because we feel that it does exclude important learnings for our students. They are our future workforce, and it's very important. I'll close by saying, when you think that this doesn't affect teachers, my daughter, who is in her mid-30s and teaches in Massachusetts, sent me an article last week about a teacher that she had had at Timberlane, who had been there for 30 years teaching history. It's not just that there's some message coming from administrators about teaching. This man moved his family after 30 years of living in Plastow to Vermont, because he was being threatened by people within extreme groups because he had signed on to a national petition just to teach the truth. Their lives were threatened. He felt like he couldn't keep his family in that place. He is now substitute teaching in Vermont. It's very real, and it's a terrible brand for our state to carry. I truly hope that you will not stand for this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Before that, I have a question. Have you looked at the original bill?
HB 50, yes.
Did you support that?
I felt that the current divisive concepts should be.
I'm just curious because somebody else had suggested that the original bill will be the one instead.
Yes, I do support the original bill in its form.
Thank you. Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question. So as the Advocacy Director for the New Hampshire Businesses for Social Responsibility, I have two questions. How big is your organization? How many businesses in New Hampshire are participating in NHBSR?
Over 250. I should have mentioned something else. In 2021, we put out a letter of opposition to the original HB 544, the Divisive Concepts bill. We very quickly had over 300 businesses in the state sign on in opposition, including 6 of the 10 largest employers in the state. So it is not, you might want to think that it's a bunch of fringe businesses. It is not. It is a lot of mainstream, traditional businesses.
May I follow up, Madam Chair?
Follow up.
Thank you. So, thank you for clarifying your membership and for the advocacy that your group took to the original Divisive Concepts bill. So my question here is, you talked about developing by investing substantially in creating workforces that foster belonging and inclusion. So if this kind of bill were to pass, how does that affect the pipeline of people who are coming into the businesses represented by NHBSR, and how does it affect productivity and cohesion within the workforce?
When people don't, there's a difference between treating people equally and treating people with equity. And so when people don't have that background to understand that some of our history has impacted how the opportunities that people had growing up, I came from a privileged background where I was able to get both my undergraduate and my master's degree thanks to my parents and their ability to be able to start a business on their own. Not all students have that ability, and I'm not saying that's necessarily tied to race or anything else. But when employees don't understand differences amongst their fellow employees, when they don't have tolerance for being able to understand a different upbringing, that I think is impacted by not understanding our history and understanding what may have taken place in the past. Even the majority of this Senate committee are females. We've all probably had cases where we've experienced more challenges as we worked through our careers. But having that history and understanding where we have come from and the shoulders that we stand upon is important for being able to address those challenges in a way that we can collaborate for a better future.
May I follow up?
Follow up.
So thank you. I appreciate you bringing up challenges that women have faced in coming through the workforce. And would it necessarily affect business cohesion and how people interact with the business environment to understand that before women were able to get their own bank account or credit line without having a co-signer of a male partner or a father, that's significant. And the reason that they couldn't was that they were deemed inferior to men financially in dealing with finances. And so they were kept from that. So that happened. That affected my mother directly. So when there are people in the workforce who have experienced this kind of discrimination, teaching about it, and possibly being called into court for teaching the reason why, does that affect how businesses are able to operate?
Exactly. That's all trying to understand systems and the levers that you use to be able to impact the outcome. All of that, when you don't understand all of the systems in place, when you don't understand all of the impacts, you can't possibly be a strategic systems thinker. So it's very important. And these companies have invested a lot of time in trying to create workplaces where everyone understands that they're valued, because they know that when that exists, then they have the opportunity to really have decisions that are creative, they're powerful, they're innovative. So to have students coming in that don't have that full understanding really puts them back to square one. We've got to start all over again, trying to rebuild those kind of collaborative workplaces. So it's very important, but it is also very important for the sake of our teachers. I can't emphasize that enough, because I forgot to say in the context of my daughter sending me that article, she said to me, "This is one of the reasons none of my friends teach in New Hampshire."
Senator Sullivan?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking my question. So I'm a little confused by some of the testimony that you gave, because you kept saying that we can't teach the history, we can't teach the historical aspects of our nation. Yet on number 3, Roman numeral 2, line 3 to Roman numeral 2, it says nothing in this section shall be construed to prohibit discussions by educators or others identified in this section. As part of the larger course of academic instruction of the historical existence of ideas and subjects identified in this section. And then it goes on. Does that not protect the historical teaching of facts in our schools?
It does at a very high level, but when there is an understanding that when those teachings go into areas that might be construed as being concerning to a certain parent, or it suddenly creates a problematic situation for a teacher. And a lot of people are afraid to have a target on their back, like Mr. Doobie, whose family was then, it wasn't even what he was told he could teach within the school, but it was also the fact that there were groups outside of the schools that identified him as being a person, that went against their beliefs, and they felt that entitled them to be able to threaten his family physically. The police were sent from Plastow at the advice of the FBI because there were credible threats. So it's not even limited within the school, but this kind of law creates an environment that invites this kind of violence.
I'm sorry, just for the record, I want to cannot condone any violence for people having an opinion on subjects. I just want to make sure that
Thank you.
we understand that's not condoned at all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your questions.
Now we're getting close to the witching hour. We have to be out of here, hopefully a few minutes before 12. Anybody else in the audience who wish to speak on HB 50? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing on the Senate Education Committee, and thank you very much for coming.